What if I told you entire cities once vanished without a trace, not lost to war or disaster, but simply abandoned, their people leaving behind towering pyramids, intricate art, and cryptic carvings as the only clues to their fate? Across the ancient Americas, from the jungles of Guatemala to the deserts of Peru, mysteries whisper to us through ruins that defy explanation. These weren't just settlements, they were thriving hubs of culture, science, and spiritual depth societies that mastered astronomy, engineered colossal structures with uncanny precision, and then disappeared into the shadows of history. Today, we're unraveling 25 of their most baffling enigmas, diving deep into the riddles left behind by the Maya, the Aztec, the Inca, and civilizations so old their names have been forgotten. Picture this: an archaeologist brushes dust from a stone slab in the heart of a rainforest, revealing symbols that haven't been read in over 1,000 years. Or imagine stumbling upon a city hidden beneath volcanic ash, its walls painted with scenes of rituals no modern eye has ever witnessed. These aren't scenes from a movie, they're real discoveries that have reshaped our understanding of the past. But for every answer, there are a dozen new questions. Why did the Maya abandon their glittering cities at the height of their power? How did the builders of Teotihuacan align their metropolis with celestial patterns we're only now deciphering? And what secrets lie hidden beneath the Andes, where tunnels and chambers hint at knowledge lost to time? This journey isn't just about the past, it's about the thrill of the unsolved, the tantalizing gaps in history that keep archaeologists awake at night. We'll explore underwater caves filled with ancient skeletons, temples adorned with eerie depictions of otherworldly beings, and even controversial artifacts that challenge everything we thought we knew. Some of these mysteries might one day be cracked open by a lucky dig or a stroke of genius. Others may remain stubbornly silent, guarding their secrets forever. But one thing's certain, by the end, you'll see the ancient Americas not as a static chapter in a textbook, but as a living, breathing puzzle, one that's waiting for you to help piece it together. One of history's most haunting vanishings unfolds deep in the jungles of Central America, where the Maya, a civilization that perfected mathematics, charted the stars, and erected cities rivaling ancient Rome, walked away from their achievements at the height of their power. By the year 900, grand plazas that once buzzed with merchants and astronomers stood silent. Temples crowned with intricate carvings were swallowed by vines. The collapse wasn't sudden, it crept across the landscape like a shadow, leaving behind a puzzle that still taunts scholars today. Was it nature's wrath that doomed them? Tree rings from the region tell a grim story, decades of relentless drought turning reservoirs to dust and crops to ash. At Tikal, the bones of children bear marks of starvation, while in Capon, a noble skeleton lies mid-defense. A spear tip lodged in his ribs hints of a society unraveling under hunger and strife. But climate alone doesn't explain why some cities fell while others, like Chichen Itza, thrived for centuries after. Perhaps the truth lies in the stones themselves. In Palenque, glyphs boast of royal bloodlines, but later inscriptions grow frantic, kings pleading with gods, nobles scrambling for alliances. Was it a revolution? A revolt against rulers who couldn't make the rains return, or something darker? Recent LiDAR scans reveal hidden fortresses near once peaceful trade routes, suggesting wars no scribe dared record. And then there are the oddities that defy all theories. At Yaxchilan, archaeologists found a ceremonial offering buried just before abandonment, a mosaic of jade and shell arranged in a perfect spiral. Not a hasty flight, but a deliberate farewell. The Maya didn't just disappear, they left clues like a trail of breadcrumbs whispering across centuries. We were here. We knew this was the end. High above the jungle canopy, where the stars burned brighter than any torchlight, the Maya built stone eyes to watch the heavens, observatories like El Caracol, a spiraling tower with narrow windows perfectly framing Venus as it danced across the night sky. This wasn't just stargazing, it was a sacred science honed over centuries. Their calendars didn't merely track time, they wove it into prophecies, planting seasons, and the rhythms of war. While Europe stumbled through the Dark Ages, Maya scribes calculated the lunar cycle down to a fraction of a day, their numbers so precise that modern astronomers still pause at their accuracy. Take the famous Dresden Codex, a bark paper book that survived centuries of humidity and conquest. Inside, tables chart Venus's movements with an error margin of just 2 hours over 500 years. For the Maya, Venus wasn't just a planet, it was Kukulkan's fiery twin, a god whose appearances signaled fortune or doom. They timed battles to its rise, designed temples so its light would slither down staircases like a celestial serpent, and even predicted eclipses that left their enemies trembling. Yet their greatest marvel might be the long count calendar, a sprawling timeline stretching back millions of days. Unlike our tidy 7-day weeks, the Maya saw time as nested cycles, wheels within wheels, some spanning decades, others millennia. When their calendar ended in 2012, panic spread worldwide, but the Maya knew better. To them, it was just the close of one age and the dawn of another, like turning a page. What's truly baffling, they achieved all this without telescopes or metal tools. At Capan, a stairway of hieroglyphs records their mastery of mathematics, including the concept of zero, a leap of thought that wouldn't reach Europe for another 1,000 years. And deep in the ruins of Palenque, an astronomer king named Pakal commissioned a hidden inscription, a cosmic equation so advanced it accurately tracks planetary alignments into the 4th millennium. Why such obsession with the skies? Perhaps because they believed the stars were a mirror. Their myths spoke of ancestors becoming constellations, of gods playing out eternal dramas in the darkness above. By reading the heavens, they weren't just predicting rain or plotting harvests, they were decoding the language of the divine. And when their cities fell, that knowledge didn't vanish. It retreated into the jungle, waiting for a new generation to look up and wonder. Stretching across Peru's arid plains like a giant sketchbook, the Nazca Lines remain one of archaeology's most bewildering masterpieces. These enormous geoglyphs, some stretching longer than a football field, weren't meant to be seen from the ground. Etched into the desert floor over 2,000 years ago, they form hummingbirds, spiders, even a grinning killer whale, all invisible unless you soar high above. But why would a culture painstakingly scrape away tons of dark rock to reveal lighter soil beneath, crafting designs they'd never fully witness? For decades, theories have spun like desert dust devils. Early researchers thought the lines pointed to sacred mountains or celestial events, the tail of the monkey glyph aligning with the summer solstice, the spider's legs mirroring star clusters. Others proposed ritual pathways where pilgrims walked the grooves in spiritual processions, their footsteps tracing the same routes as gods. Then came the wilder ideas, landing strips for ancient astronauts, a claim that took root in the 1970s but crumbles under scrutiny. The truth, as always, is far more fascinating. Recent drone surveys have uncovered hundreds of hidden lines, some buried for centuries under shifting sands. What's revealing, many converge around natural water sources. In a land where rain might come once a decade, the Nazca may have used these markers as a sprawling hydraulic map, guiding communities to life-giving underground aquifers. One newly discovered spiral, etched near a dried-up spring, mirrors the shape of a puquio, an ancient spiral well designed to pull water to the surface. Could these glyphs be a prayer etched into the earth itself, begging the heavens for moisture? But the mystery deepens. Some lines run perfectly straight for miles, defying the rugged terrain without a single waver. How archaeologists found wooden stakes at key points, suggesting the Nazca used simple ropes and stakes to plot their designs, a testament to their engineering grit. And then there's the matter of perspective. Viewed from certain hilltops, specific glyphs align with the setting sun during planting seasons, hinting at a dual purpose, part almanac, part altar. The most haunting clue lies in the artifacts left behind. At the center of some line clusters, excavations revealed piles of broken pottery vessels smashed in rituals, their shards mixed with seashells from distant coasts. Offerings perhaps to gods who controlled both water and sky. The Nazca didn't just leave us puzzles, they left a whisper of their worldview, where art, survival, and the divine were woven into the very ground they walked. And as technology peels back more layers, one thing becomes clear. These lines weren't meant for us. They were a conversation with the cosmos, written in earth and time. Rising from the valley floor like a silent challenge to time itself, Teotihuacan's massive pyramids and sprawling plazas tell a story without words because no one has ever found a single decipherable inscription naming its builders. This wasn't just a city, it was a metropolis so grand that the Aztec, who stumbled upon its ruins centuries later, believed only gods could have created it. Yet by the time the Aztec arrived, Teotihuacan had already been empty for 700 years, its streets echoing with the ghosts of a civilization that left behind no kings, no battles, no signed monuments. Only stone giants whispering riddles. At its heart looms the Pyramid of the Sun, a colossus so precisely aligned that on May 19th and July 25th, the sun sets directly behind it when viewed from the Temple of Quetzalcoatl. But here's the twist, those dates don't match any major Aztec or Maya rituals. Instead, they mark the beginning and peak of the rainy season, a farmer's calendar etched in architecture. Even more startling, the pyramid's base perimeter equals exactly 864 meters, a number that mirrors the sacred Aztec calendar cycle. Yet carbon dating proves Teotihuacan predates the Aztec by a millennium. So who calculated these cosmic blueprints and why? Walk the avenue of the dead and the mystery deepens. This central boulevard runs 15 degrees east of true north, an alignment that mirrors the three stars of Orion's belt, a pattern sacred to cultures from Egypt to the Maya. But unlike the Maya, Teotihuacan's builders left no star charts or royal tombs to explain their obsession. Instead, archaeologists find mass graves, skeletons of warriors from distant lands, their hands bound, adorned with shells from the Gulf Coast and feathers from the tropics. Some clutch obsidian blades from mines 500 miles away. Was this a melting pot of empires or the scene of a catastrophe that rewrote history? Then there's the enigma of abandonment. Around 550 CE, fires gutted the city's grandest temples, not random blazes, but systematic burns targeting altars and elite residences. Oddly, no weapons or invasion layers follow. Instead, the ruins show meticulous cleanup, broken statues carefully buried, precious items sealed in hidden caches. It's as if the people chose to erase their own legacy, leaving behind one final clue. Beneath the Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent, radar scans reveal a tunnel filled with liquid mercury and thousands of miniature mountains carved from jade, a shimmering underworld mirroring the night sky. Perhaps the greatest testament to Teotihuacan's power isn't what they built, but what they didn't need. No boastful kings carved into stelae, no chronicles of conquest. Their influence spread through ideas, not inscriptions. Maya nobles copied their art, Zapotec rulers mimicked their architecture, and 1,000 years after its fall, Aztec pilgrims still knelt in its ruins. Teotihuacan didn't just vanish, it became a ghost that shaped civilizations, its true name lost to time, its purpose humming beneath the soil, waiting for the right hand to brush away the dust. Buried in the swampy lowlands of Mexico's Gulf Coast, 17 stone giants stare blankly across the centuries, each one a face carved with startling individuality, from furrowed brows to plump cheeks, as if frozen in mid-conversation. These are the Olmec colossal heads, some weighing as much as 40 tons, sculpted from a single block of basalt over 3,000 years ago. The Olmec, often called Mesoamerica's mother culture, left no written records, so these silent sentinels are our only window into their world. But whose faces do they bear? The prevailing theory suggests they're portraits of rulers, their distinctive headgear echoing the elaborate helmets worn in ritual ball games. Yet not a single head has been found intact. All were deliberately toppled, noses smashed, as if someone sought to erase their memory. The logistics of their creation boggle the mind. Basalt doesn't exist naturally in the Olmec heartland. The nearest source is the Tuxtla Mountains, 50 miles away through tangled jungle and rivers. Without wheels, beasts of burden, or metal tools, how did they move these monoliths? Archaeologists have tried replicating the feat using ropes, rollers, and log sledges, a backbreaking process requiring hundreds of laborers for weeks. Even more perplexing, some heads show signs of being recarved from earlier monuments, hinting at power struggles or shifting ideologies. One head at La Venta was discovered buried upright, oriented precisely north, as if standing guard over something far older and far stranger beneath the earth. Then there's the enigma of their expressions. Unlike the idealized faces of later Maya kings, these are shockingly human. Some smirk, others scowl. One even wears a cranial deformation so severe it suggests real-life inspiration. Were they commemorating actual leaders or perhaps vanquished foes? At the site of Tres Zapotes, a head was found with a glyph later used by the Maya to mark the end of a calendar cycle, implying the Olmec might have pioneered concepts borrowed by successor cultures. The greatest clue, though, lies in what's missing. No two heads are alike, yet none bear the insignia of war or divinity common in later Mesoamerican art. Instead, they radiate raw presence, as if the Olmec sought to capture not just likeness but essence, an attempt to make stone remember flesh. And in their silent vigil, they pose a challenge. How do we read a civilization that speaks only in faces? Across the Mississippi River from modern-day St. Louis, a grassy plateau rises 10 stories high, not a natural hill, but an ancient pyramid built by hand, basketful of earth by basketful of earth. This is Monk's Mound, the crown jewel of Cahokia, a city that thrived 700 years before Columbus with a population surpassing medieval London. At its peak around 1100 CE, this sprawling metropolis boasted a grand plaza, bustling markets, and over 120 earthen mounds, all centered around a structure so vast it contains 22 million cubic feet of soil. That's enough dirt to fill 30 Olympic swimming pools, all moved without wheels, beasts of burden, or metal tools. What's truly staggering isn't just the scale, but the precision. The mound's 4 terraces align with the cardinal directions, and from its summit, rulers could gaze across 50 acres of ceremonial space to a mysterious circle of cedar posts now called Woodhenge. Like its namesake in England, this was a solar calendar but with a distinctly American twist. On the spring equinox, the rising sun would crest directly over a marker post, casting shadows that told farmers precisely when to plant. Archaeologists found pits filled with offerings at each post, bundles of red ochre arrowheads, even the remains of a young woman buried facing the sunrise. Then around 1250, Cahokia's lights went out, not with a bang but a whimper. The Grand Plaza became a graveyard with mass burials showing signs of malnutrition and violence. One pit held 53 women, their bones bearing cut marks from flint knives. A grim ritual sacrifice, perhaps a desperate plea to gods who'd turned their backs. The climate record tells part of the story. Tree rings reveal decades of drought and erratic floods that would have devastated corn crops, but Cahokia's neighbors, like the nearby Emerald Acropolis, weathered the same storms and thrived. The key might lie in Cahokia's very ambition. Soil samples show the city stripped the land bare for construction, triggering erosion that choked waterways with silt. And then there are the artifacts left behind, not treasures but trash. Midden piles reveal something startling. As collapse loomed, Cahokians stopped making fine pottery and ornate carvings, opting for crude, quick-to-make substitutes. It's the archaeological equivalent of a society running on fumes, its cultural memory fading even before the last residents walked away. Yet the most haunting clue sits beneath Monk's Mound itself. Ground-penetrating radar detected an anomaly, a hidden chamber or perhaps an earlier, smaller mound entombed within the larger structure. Cahokia's builders, it seems, literally buried their past as they built upward, layer upon layer, like a civilization trying to outpace its own shadow. Today, the site stands silent, its true name lost, its people scattered into the mists of history. But the questions remain: was this North America's first great city, or its most cautionary tale? Perched on a knife-edge ridge in the Andes, 2,000 feet above the roaring Urubamba River, Machu Picchu seems to defy both gravity and logic. Why would the Inca master engineers who ruled the largest empire in the ancient Americas choose such an impossible location for a city? Was it a royal estate for the Emperor Pachacuti, a sacred sanctuary for sun priestesses, or something far more enigmatic? The answer might lie in the stones themselves. Every wall in Machu Picchu is a marvel of seismic foresight, their trapezoidal doorways and slightly tilted walls designed to sway, not shatter, during earthquakes. Even the mortarless joints between granite blocks are engineered with such precision that you couldn't slip a credit card between them, a technique called ashlar masonry that's puzzled modern architects for centuries. But the real mystery isn't how they built it, it's why they left. Unlike other Inca strongholds, Machu Picchu shows no signs of battle or forced abandonment when the Spanish arrived in the 1530s. Instead, the evidence suggests a deliberate, orderly departure. Archaeologists found intact storage jars still filled with quinoa, tools neatly stashed under buildings, and even ceremonial offerings left on altars, as if the inhabitants believed they'd return. Recent pollen studies reveal something even stranger. The terraces were never fully cultivated. This wasn't a bustling agricultural hub, but a place of ritual and retreat, possibly active for fewer than 80 years before being silently surrendered to the clouds. The site's celestial alignments deepen the puzzle. At dawn on the winter solstice, sunlight pierces a carefully positioned window in the Temple of the Sun, striking a ceremonial stone with surgical precision. Below it, a hidden chamber once held the mummies of Inca nobles, their remains wrapped in sacred textiles. Yet Machu Picchu's most sacred space, the Teotihuacan stone, wasn't just a sundial. It's a spiritual hitching post for the sun, calibrated to anchor the solstice light during ceremonies. When Spanish chroniclers later described the Incas' terror that their gods would abandon them, was this the fear that emptied Machu Picchu? A belief that the Spanish conquest had ruptured the cosmic order, making the site's rituals futile? Or perhaps the truth is etched into the land itself. The Urubamba River wraps around Machu Picchu in a near-perfect crescent, mirroring the Incas' celestial worship of the moon goddess Quilla. And high above the ruins, a rarely visited peak called Huayna Picchu isn't just a backdrop, it's a deliberate part of the design. From its summit, the entire city aligns with the sacred Apus or mountain spirits, creating a living map of Inca cosmology. The Inca didn't just build a city, they sculpted a prayer into the Andes, one that still hums with unanswered questions. Why abandon a place so meticulously woven into their world view? The stones keep their silence, but the wind rushing through the terraces seems to whisper, "Look closer." High in the Andes, where the air thins and the condors circle, the Inca crafted a language not of ink and parchment, but of spun wool and intricate knots. These quipus clusters of brightly colored cords dangling like sacred fringe were the empire's living ledger, recording everything from grain harvests to celestial prophecies. To the untrained eye, they're mere strings, but pull one taut and you'll feel the bumps of history, clusters of knots encoding numbers, their positions marking units, tens, hundreds. The Inca, who ruled without a written alphabet, built the largest pre-Columbian empire using mathematics woven into fiber, a system so sophisticated it's been called the binary code of the ancient world. Yet the full story remains tantalizingly out of reach. Spanish chroniclers wrote of quipu trained scribes who could read the knots aloud like poetry, recounting laws, battles, even genealogies. But after the conquest, these keepers of knowledge were silenced, their techniques lost. Modern researchers have cracked the numeric code. The placement and type of knot, figure 8, long, or braided clearly represent quantities, proven by quipus matching census records from colonial documents. But the true breakthrough came in 2005 when a quipu surfaced with knots arranged in a rare, non-numerical pattern. Was this a word, a name? The first whisper of a literary language, the complexity deepens when you examine the chords themselves. Some quipus have over 2,000 strings, each dyed in specific color sequences with subtle variations in twist direction. Anthropologist Gary Urton noticed something extraordinary. The combinations mirror the decision-making logic of modern computer programming, where binary choices build complex information. Could a crimson cord knotted leftward mean harvest, while the same hue twisted rightward signaled famine? The hypothesis is electrifying. These may not just be records, but narratives waiting for their Rosetta Stone. Perhaps the most haunting clue lies in what the Spanish burned. In 1560, a priest ordered the destruction of hundreds of quipus in a campaign against idolatry. Only about 800 survive today, many cut or faded. But in remote Andean villages, elders still speak of quipus hidden in caves or passed down secretly through generations. One was found recently tucked inside a carved wooden tube, its knots untouched since the days of Atahualpa. As archaeologists scan these relics with 3D imaging, they're uncovering subtle indentations, knots tied over earlier knots, like palimpsests of a story rewritten. What secrets might still emerge? A few tantalizing hints. Some quipus have pendant cords branching off main strings, possibly marking historical events like the death of a ruler. Others cluster in sets of 24, mirroring the Inca ritual calendar, and in Cusco's cathedral, woven into colonial-era tapestries, scholars spy designs suspiciously similar to quipu patterns, a silent rebellion, preserving the old ways in saintly garb. The truth may well be knotted into the very fabric of the Andes, where threads of memory stretch unbroken across 5 centuries, waiting for the right hands to trace their meaning. For centuries, explorers spoke of the Amazon as a green desert, a vast, untamed wilderness where only scattered tribes eked out simple existences. But beneath that emerald canopy, laser scans are now revealing a secret: sprawling urban networks so advanced they rewrite history. LiDAR technology, those same aerial lasers that unmasked lost Maya cities, has peeled back the rainforest's veil, exposing geometric earthworks, wide causeways, and even elevated highways connecting settlements across hundreds of miles. This wasn't a wilderness, it was a managed landscape, home to millions before European contact, challenging everything we thought we knew about the Amazon's past. Take the recent discovery in Bolivia's Llanos de Mojos, where LiDAR revealed 26 interconnected settlements, some larger than medieval London. Circular plazas radiated outward like spokes, linked by straight roads running for miles across savannas that flood knee-deep in the rainy season. But here's the twist: these weren't haphazard paths. The roads were elevated, built up with precisely layered soils to stay dry year-round, an infrastructure project requiring generations of coordinated labor. And around them, grids of raised fields and fish ponds formed a sustainable food system that modern permaculturists are only now beginning to replicate. The scale defies belief. In Brazil's Tapajós Basin, archaeologists uncovered evidence of garden cities, where inhabitants enriched poor rainforest soils with charcoal and pottery shards, creating fertile black earth called terra preta. Some patches stretch for acres, still visibly darker and more productive than surrounding soil after 800 years. these weren't just farms, they were engineered ecosystems. Fruit trees planted in orderly rows, canals directing water to crops, and even signs of domesticated orchids possibly for medicine or ritual use. But perhaps the most revolutionary find lies in Ecuador's Upano Valley, where LiDAR exposed a metropolis dubbed Lost City of the Jaguar. 5 major settlements clustered along terraced hillsides, their streets aligned with volcanic peaks. Over 6,000 rectangular platforms, likely foundations for homes or temples, dot the landscape, arranged with mathematical precision. Most astonishing, a network of wide, straight roads connecting cities across valleys and ridges, some extending over 15 miles. This wasn't just a village. It was a civilization. Why did these societies vanish? Clues hide in the dirt. Layers of charcoal suggest large-scale burning, possibly from warfare or environmental stress. Yet, unlike the Maya collapse, there's no evidence of sudden catastrophe. Instead, these cities seem to have faded gradually, their earthworks reclaimed by roots and vines as populations dispersed. Some researchers theorize that introduced European diseases raced ahead of conquistadors, emptying the Amazon decades before the first Spanish boots touched its soil. The implications ripple far beyond archaeology. For years, debates raged over whether the Amazon could sustain large populations without destroying itself. These discoveries, PROVE, Chinese letter, 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 the ancients mastered agroforestry, blending agriculture with intact canopy to prevent erosion while producing food. Their raised fields absorbed floods without silting rivers. Their urban planning minimized deforestation. In an era of climate crisis, we're just beginning to grasp the genius beneath our feet, a legacy whispering that the untouched Amazon was never wild. It was tended. At Chichen Itza, even the stones have voices. Clap your hands at the base of the towering Kukulkan pyramid, and the echo doesn't just bounce back. It transforms into the eerie chirp of the sacred Quetzal bird, a sound revered across Mesoamerica as the voice of the feathered serpent god himself. Architects didn't just stack these steps for looks, they engineered them like a colossal musical instrument. Each of the pyramid's 4 staircases has exactly 91 steps, totaling 364 when combined with the shared platform at the top. Add the summit temple as the final step, and you get 365, a solar year carved in stone. But the true magic unfolds when sound waves ricochet off the staggered limestone treads, creating a series of delays that blend into that uncanny avian trill. Was this auditory illusion accidental? Not likely. Move to the Great Ball Court and the phenomenon grows stranger. Stretching over 500 feet, longer than a modern football field, its towering parallel walls act like a supernatural microphone. Stand at one end and whisper, and someone at the opposite goal will hear you with jarring clarity, as if you're speaking directly into their ear, even more unsettling. The court's acoustics amplify specific frequencies, distorting voices into ghostly echoes that seem to hang in the air. Archaeoacoustics experts have mapped these effects, noting how the wall's precise slope and the stone rings mounted overhead create a waveguide effect technology we associate with modern concert halls. But why would a civilization without formal physics invest such effort in sonic precision? The answer might lie in the Maya's sacred texts. Their creation myth, the Popol Vuh, describes a world shaped by sound, a god speaking the names of things to call them into being. At Chichen Itza, rituals often reenacted this cosmic drama. During equinoxes, sunlight slithers down the pyramid steps like Kukulkan's spectral body, while the Quetzal's cry would have signaled his divine presence. In the ball game, a ritual that sometimes ended in sacrifice, the whispering walls may have allowed priests to channel the voices of ancestors or gods during ceremonies. Skeptics argue these effects could be coincidental, pointing out that Mayan builders left no written manuals on acoustic design. Yet recent 3D scans reveal subtle irregularities in the pyramid steps, tiny deviations from uniformity that actually enhance the Quetzal effect. Meanwhile, at the nearby Temple of the Warriors, researchers found that a handclap at its base produces an echo matching the frequency of a jaguar's growl, another sacred animal. The evidence suggests a pattern, a culture that didn't just worship nature's symphony but learned to weave it into their architecture. Perhaps the most compelling proof lies in the stars. The ball court aligns with Venus, whose appearances the Maya tied to war and renewal. On nights when the planet was brightest, sound tests show the court's acoustics become even more pronounced, as if the structure harmonizes with the cosmos. In a civilization where astronomy, architecture, and spirituality were inseparable, these sonic marvels weren't party tricks, they were portals, a way to make the gods audible, proving divinity wasn't just seen or felt but heard. And 7 centuries after the last priest vanished from Chichen Itza, the stones still sing their secrets to anyone who listens. Buried beneath the scorching sands of China's Taklamakan Desert lies a mystery that shouldn't exist: rows of mummified faces with high cheekbones, blonde or red hair, and plaited beards, their bodies wrapped in intricate woolen textiles resembling Celtic tartans. These are the Tarim Basin mummies, preserved for over 4,000 years by the desert's dry air, and their very presence flips the script on ancient migration. How did people with distinctly European features end up in the heart of Central Asia a millennium before the Silk Road? The most famous of them, the Chechen man, towers at 6 feet 6 inches tall, dressed in a crimson tunic with matching leggings and felt boots, his grave stocked with cheese, wheat, and a harp. Nearby, the beauty of Lulan wears a finely woven cloak fastened with wooden pins, her auburn braids still coiled with feathers. The textiles alone are a revelation, advanced twill weaves identical to those found in Bronze Age Austria, dyed with vibrant minerals like madder red and indigo. These weren't nomadic rags, they were the fashions of a sophisticated culture that mastered textile chemistry while Egypt's pyramids were still new. DNA tests have only deepened the puzzle. Genetic sequencing reveals the mummies carried markers linking them to ancient populations from the Black Sea steppes, not East Asia. Yet their burial customs, placing dolls in children's graves, marking tombs with towering wooden poles, echo practices from Siberia to Scandinavia. Some scholars argue they were the elusive Tocharians, an Indo-European speaking people later recorded in Chinese texts as towering, green-eyed merchants. Others propose they were part of a vast migration wave that carried early Yamnaya herders eastward, their ox-drawn carts carving trails across the Eurasian wilderness. But here's where the plot twists. These mummies weren't just passing through, they thrived for centuries, adapting to one of Earth's harshest environments. Their settlements featured irrigation canals diverting glacial meltwater to fields of millet and barley, while their graves held saddles and bridles, evidence of some of the world's earliest horseback riders. Even more startling, some mummies were buried with ephedra twigs, a plant sacred to later Zoroastrians, hinting at spiritual links stretching all the way to Persia. The real enigma is their silence. Unlike the Mayas' carved stelae or Egypt's hieroglyphs, the Tarim people left no inscriptions. Their language survives only in loanwords absorbed by later Chinese dynasties, words for horse, honey, and wheel that sound eerily like Proto-Indo-European. And then, around 1800 BCE, their culture vanishes. Did they assimilate? Were they pushed out by climate shifts that turned their rivers to dust? One clue lingers in their textiles, a child's mummy wrapped in a blanket stitched with sun symbols, the same motif found on Bronze Age artifacts from the Danube to the Yellow River. These threads, both literal and cultural, suggest a truth we're only beginning to grasp. Long before empires rose, the ancient world was a tapestry of unexpected connections, woven by travelers who dared to cross deserts and mountains, leaving behind nothing but their stories and their strangely familiar faces. Rising from Mexico's arid highlands, the ruins of Chala whisper two conflicting stories, one carved in stone, the other woven through legend. To the Aztec, this was Tollan, the fabled capital of the god King Quetzalcoatl, where feather-clad priests forged an empire so golden that its mere memory inspired reverence centuries after its fall. But archaeologists scraping back layers of dirt and myth face a thornier truth. Was Chala truly the Toltec heartland, or a stage where later civilizations projected their dreams of a lost golden age? The site's most iconic sentinels are its four massive warrior statues, each 9 feet tall, gripping curved weapons called atlatls while frozen mid-stride atop Pyramid B. Their stiff postures and stoic faces resemble later Aztec art, but dig deeper and contradictions emerge. The pyramid itself is a patchwork of styles, Maya-like serpent columns, Teotihuacan-esque reliefs, even mixtec geometric patterns. This isn't the uniform vision of a single empire, but a cultural crossroads. Even the name Toltec raises eyebrows. Aztec texts describe them as master artisans and wise rulers, but outside these accounts, evidence is thin. No monumental inscriptions proclaim Toltec glory. No contemporary chronicles from neighboring states mention their conquests. Could the Aztec have invented them as political propaganda, a way to legitimize their own rule by linking it to an idealized past? Then there's the Quetzalcoatl conundrum. At Chala, carvings show a plumed serpent winding around temple doorways, but they lack the elaborate detail of later Aztec depictions. More telling, the city's collapse around 1150 CE coincides with a period of drought and unrest, events later mythologized as Quetzalcoatl's exile after a battle with dark forces. Recent excavations suggest a grimmer reality, mass graves filled with bones bearing cut marks, their limbs twisted in defensive postures. Chala didn't fade peacefully, it burned. Yet dismissing the Toltecs entirely misses the forest for the trees. Chemical analysis of pottery shards reveals trade goods from as far away as modern-day Guatemala and New Mexico, proof of a far-reaching network. And those iconic warrior columns, their headdresses match descriptions of Toltec military orders in Aztec codices too precisely to be pure fiction. Perhaps the truth lies in the middle, not a vast empire but a powerful city-state whose influence was magnified by time and nostalgia, its real achievements blurred into legend. The final clue might lie in Chala's most overlooked feature, its ball court. Unlike the grand arenas at Chichen Itza, this one is modest, its walls unadorned. But beneath its playing floor, archaeologists found a cache of ceremonial knives and seashells from both coasts, offerings that mirror later Aztec rituals. The Toltecs, it seems, weren't just a myth. They were the template, a people whose reality became the clay from which empires would sculpt their origin stories. And as the midday sun casts long shadows over Chala's ruined plazas, those silent warrior statues seem to ask, does it matter if the legends exaggerate when the echoes of their truth still shape history? At Huaca de la Luna, the walls still weep not with water, but with centuries of oxidized pigment, their murals depicting a parade of prisoners dragged toward an altar where knives flash and blood spills in ritual torrents. This was the sacred theater of the Moche, a civilization that ruled northern Peru's arid coast for 700 years, leaving behind pyramids painted with scenes so visceral they seemed to pulse with remembered terror. But these weren't mere acts of brutality. Every slit throat, every goblet of consumed blood was part of an intricate pact between gods, rulers, and the fickle forces of nature. The ceremonies followed a horrifying script. Excavations at the temple revealed pits filled with the remains of dozens of young men, their bones bearing identical cuts, deep incisions across the throat, deliberate fractures to extract marrow, and skulls smashed post-mortem to drain cranial fluid. Forensic analysis shows they weren't locals. Isotopes in their teeth trace them to distant highlands, likely captured in raids, but the most chilling detail. Many victims were forced to drink copious amounts of fermented chicha beer in their final hours. their stomachs distended with alcohol, a ritual sedative, or perhaps a way to thin their blood for easier collection. Then there's the art. Moche pottery depicts priests in elaborate regalia holding golden cups to catch arterial spray, their faces transformed into fanged deities mid-transformation. One famous stirrup spout bottle shows a ruler drinking from a goblet while a bound prisoner's throat is slit above him, the streams merging into a single vessel. This wasn't random violence, it was cosmological accounting. The Moche believed the world required constant repayment in blood to maintain balance, especially when the climate turned against them. And turn it did. Sediment cores from nearby lakes tell a story of catastrophic El Niño cycles, decades when warm Pacific waters diverted rain clouds, turning fertile valleys into dust bowls. At Huaca de la Luna, archaeologists found layers of flood debris alternating with sandstorms, precisely the conditions that would have collapsed Moche agriculture. Here's where sacrifice becomes political genius. By staging spectacles of control, demonstrating their power to commune with gods who could supposedly halt disasters, rulers transformed desperation into loyalty. The proof is in the architecture. The temple was rebuilt at least 6 times, each layer larger than the last, its walls repainted with fresh battle scenes. Every renovation coincided with climate crises, as if chaos itself became the mortar holding Moche society together. In the final phase, the altar's floor was deliberately cracked, bodies stuffed into the fissure before being sealed, a last desperate offering to the earth. When the rains failed again, the people walked away, leaving their gods thirsty and their secrets buried under centuries of sand. Until now, high in the mist-shrouded peaks of northern Peru, where the Andes plunge into the Amazon basin, the Chachapoya people built their strongholds not just on mountaintops but on the very edges of the sky. Their greatest fortress, Cuelap, looms over a 9,000-foot precipice, its walls 60 feet tall, in places 3 times the height of Europe's mightiest medieval castles. Unlike the Inca's clean-cut stonework, Cuelap's bulwarks bulge with organic curves, embedded with zigzagging friezes and enigmatic faces carved into the mortar, as if the walls themselves are alive. The Chachapoya, dubbed the warriors of the clouds by the Inca, thrived in this improbable landscape for centuries, their circular stone houses clinging to ridges like eagles' nests. But their real genius lay in their defiance of nature. At Cuelap's entrance, a narrow ramp funnels visitors upward, forcing them to walk single file, a tactical bottleneck where a handful of defenders could hold off an army. Inside, 400 dwellings cluster in tight rings, their thatched roofs long gone but their foundations revealing a society that prized privacy. Each home had its own separate granary, signaling wealth beyond mere survival. Then came the Inca. By the late 1400s, their empire was expanding like ink across parchment, swallowing cultures from Ecuador to Chile. The Chachapoya resisted with a ferocity that stunned their conquerors. Spanish chronicles describe battles where cloud warriors rolled boulders onto advancing troops, and guerrilla strikes launched from fog banks so thick the Inca couldn't tell earth from sky. At the fortress of Cerro Los Cruces, archaeologists found sling stones stockpiled by the thousands, still waiting behind collapsed battlements, yet defiance wasn't enough. After decades of war, the Chachapoya were absorbed into the empire, their warriors drafted into the Inca army as elite shock troops. But here's the twist: assimilation wasn't surrender. At the ruin of Rivache, high in a sandstone canyon, mummified nobles were buried in miniature cliffside houses painted crimson, their bodies wrapped in textiles that blend Chachapoya spirals with Inca checkerboards. Even in death, they refused to erase themselves. The final mystery is their disappearance. When smallpox ravaged the Inca Empire in the 1520s, the Chachapoya's remoteness spared them at first. But by the time Spanish conquistadors reached these heights, Cuelap was already abandoned, its gates sealed from within. Only one clue remains: deep in the fortress, a solitary dwelling stands apart, its walls scorched by a deliberate fire. Here, excavators found shattered pottery and the bones of a young woman curled around an intact spindle whorl, as if she'd stayed behind to spin thread for ghosts while her people vanished into the clouds that gave them their name. Stretching across Ohio's river valleys like a giant celestial blueprint, the Hopewell earthworks defy simple explanation. These aren't just piles of dirt, they're precise geometric formations, octagons the size of 12 football fields, perfect circles aligned to lunar standstills, and serpentine walls that coil across the landscape with eerie intentionality. At Newark's Great Circle, a 1,000-foot-wide enclosure framed by earthen walls 8 feet tall, the geometry is so exact that 19th-century surveyors assumed European colonists built it. But radiocarbon dates tell a different story. These monuments were rising 2,000 years ago, centuries before the first European cathedrals, crafted by a culture that left no written records, only whispers in the soil. What's truly staggering isn't just their scale, but their astronomical precision. The octagon earthworks, connected to a matching circle by a ritual causeway, align with the moon's most extreme northern and southern rises over an 18.6-year cycle, a phenomenon modern astronomers call the lunar major standstill. On these nights, the moon appears to pause in its journey across the sky, hovering directly over key points in the earthworks before reversing course. The builders didn't merely observe these cycles, they etched them into the earth, turning entire valleys into a cosmic clock. But the Hopewell weren't just stargazers. Their trade network spanned continents. Excavations have uncovered obsidian from Wyoming's Yellowstone, shark's teeth from Florida's Gulf Coast, copper mined near Lake Superior, and even meteoric iron hammered into ceremonial ornaments, all transported hundreds of miles without beasts of burden or wheels. At Ohio's Tremper Mound, archaeologists uncovered a cache of over 200 ceremonial pipes carved into animal effigies, otters, bears, even a haunting human figure with hollow eyes, each pipe stained with the residue of ritual tobacco blends. The materials tell a story of diplomacy, not just goods exchanged but alliances forged across vast distances. Then, around 500 CE, the earthwork stopped growing. The great ceremonial centers emptied, the flow of exotic goods dwindled, and the culture that built them faded into obscurity. Climate data hints at a culprit. Tree rings from the era show decades of erratic rainfall and cooling temperatures, destabilizing the maize agriculture that had begun supplementing their hunter-gatherer diet. But there's more. At sites like Sape Mound, graves from the final phase reveal a grim trend: young adults with skeletal markers of malnutrition and infectious disease, buried with fewer grave goods than their ancestors. Yet the most haunting clue lies in what they left behind. At the Mound City complex, excavators found pits filled with broken pottery and charred timbers, not the debris of invasion but of deliberate closure ceremonies. The Hopewell didn't just walk away, they sealed their sacred spaces, burning ceremonial structures and scattering the ashes before covering them with fresh layers of earth. It's as if they knew their cosmology was ending and chose to bury it whole. Today, these earthworks still hold secrets. Recent LiDAR scans revealed previously hidden formations, a massive square beneath a farm field, its corners aligned to cardinal directions, and a sprawling enclosure shaped like a bird in flight. The Hopewell may have vanished, but their legacy lingers in the land, waiting for the moon to once again trace the paths they carved into the earth. Their greatest monument wasn't any single mound, it was the act of turning an entire continent into a living map of the cosmos. Deep in Colombia's Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, where mist curls around peaks so steep they seem to scrape the sky, the Tairona people engineered a civilization designed to disappear. Unlike the Maya or Inca, who built monuments meant to awe, the Tairona's greatest genius lay in concealment. Their cities, clusters of circular stone houses and ceremonial plazas, cling to slopes so vertiginous that Spanish conquistadors never found them, despite decades of searching for the source of the legendarily rich Golden Kings. Today, reaching these ruins requires hikes so treacherous that even seasoned archaeologists arrive breathless, not just from altitude but from wonder. The stonework tells a story of defiance. At Ciudad Perdida, the lost city, rediscovered in the 1970s by looters chasing pottery, over 150 terraces carve the mountainside into a stepped tapestry. Each platform is held in place by retaining walls fitted without mortar, their stones so precisely stacked they've withstood 500 years of torrential rains and landslides. But these weren't just agricultural steps, they were an urban camouflage. From above, the terraces blend into the forested slopes, invisible to Spanish ships patrolling the coast below. Narrow staircases connect the levels, some only wide enough for single-file passage, turning the entire city into a defensive maze. Gold was both the Tarona's glory and their curse. In tombs tucked beneath house floors, artisans left behind pectorals and nose rings depicting jaguars and bat gods, their surfaces shimmering with a technique called tumbaga, a mix of gold and copper that gave the metal a fiery hue. But the real treasure lay in their trade routes. The Tarona engineered stone-paved highways that snaked through valleys and overpasses, linking highland farms to coastal salt pans. These weren't mere trails, some stretched 16 feet wide, their cobbles worn smooth by centuries of bare feet. Spanish chronicles describe merchants carrying emeralds and honey along these roads, their loads balanced on their backs with tumplines, a system so efficient that modern backpackers still use the same design. Yet the Tarona's greatest secret wasn't their wealth but their water. At Pueblito, another hidden settlement, engineers built a network of underground channels that redirected mountain streams to every household. The system was so advanced that during droughts they could prioritize flow to ceremonial baths where priests performed purification rites. But when the Spanish invasion intensified, the Tarona weaponized their own infrastructure. Oral histories speak of elders dismantling aqueducts and burning crops, forcing their people to scatter higher into the clouds rather than surrender. The proof of their resilience lingers in the DNA of the Kogi, their direct descendants. Today's Kogi, who call themselves the Elder Brothers, still inhabit these peaks, guarding sacred sites and warning outsiders of ecological collapse. Their survival is the Tarona's final masterpiece, a culture that didn't just hide from history but outlasted it. And somewhere in those mist-shrouded heights, untouched tombs may still wait, their golden contents humming with stories of a people who chose invisibility over extinction. Perched atop a flattened mountain in Oaxaca's valley, Monte Albon doesn't just overlook the landscape, it commands it. The Zapotec people didn't just build a city here, they sculpted an entire mountaintop into a terraced masterpiece. Its grand plaza aligned so precisely with celestial events that on certain days, shadows slither across the stones like living things. But among the pyramids and ball courts, one feature stops visitors cold: the danzantes, or dancers, over 300 stone slabs carved with figures frozen in agonized contortions, their tongues lolling, their limbs twisted as if caught mid-spasm. These aren't celebrations of movement, they're portraits of captives, some with glyphs naming rival lords, their bodies displayed like gruesome trophies. The danzantes reveal a society obsessed with dominance, but Monte Albon's true power lay in its alliances. Around 300 CE, something extraordinary happened. Green obsidian from Teotihuacan, a material so prized it functioned like ancient currency, began flooding Zapotec markets. At the same time, Teotihuacan's art suddenly featured Zapotec-style glyphs. This wasn't just trade, it was a geopolitical handshake. Excavations in Monte Albon's central plaza uncovered a Teotihuacan-style patio adorned with murals of the storm god, a deity foreign to Zapotec religion until that moment. The message was clear: two superpowers had chosen cooperation over conflict, but why? The answer might lie in a massacre. Beneath one of Monte Albon's temples, archaeologists found a mass grave. Men, women, and children slaughtered in a single event, their bones bearing marks of ritual defleshing. Isotope analysis showed they weren't locals, but likely invaders from the rival city of Cuilapan. This grim discovery suggests the Zapotec-Teotihuacan Pact wasn't just about commerce, it was a mutual defense treaty against common enemies, sealed in blood and obsidian. The most haunting clue to this alliance, though, sits in plain sight. High on Monte Albon's main platform, a stone slab depicts two figures facing each other, one in Zapotec headdress, the other in Teotihuacan's distinct feathered serpent regalia. Between them floats a glyph representing a bundle of years, a symbol of shared time, of futures intertwined. The Zapotec didn't just carve their victories in stone. They etched the delicate dance of empire into the very bones of the mountain, a testament to the fact that even in the ancient world, survival sometimes meant knowing when to clasp hands rather than raise swords. Long before the Inca carved their empire into the Andes, another civilization wove a web of stone roads across Peru's impossible terrain, roads so advanced they baffle modern engineers. The Weri, a culture that dominated the highlands from 600 to 1000 CE, engineered highways stretching over 25,000 miles, their routes clinging to cliffsides and plunging into cloud forests with a precision that makes Rome's famed roads seem almost rudimentary. Unlike the Inca, who built for grandeur, the Weri prioritized ruthless efficiency. Their paths rarely zigzagged up slopes but shot straight upward, using staircases so steep they force modern hikers to crawl on hands and knees. What's astonishing isn't just the engineering, it's the purpose. These weren't mere trade routes. Excavations along the roads reveal way stations stocked with weapon caches and barracks, suggesting the Weri moved armies as swiftly as merchants. At Cerro Ball, a mountaintop fortress connected to the network, archaeologists found breweries capable of producing thousands of gallons of chicha beer per week, likely provisions for troop movements or diplomatic summits. The Weri didn't just build roads, they built an empire's central nervous system, a way to project power across landscapes that would cripple lesser cultures. Yet their collapse is the real mystery. By the year 1000, these highways lay abandoned, their stonework buried under landslides. Climate data reveals a culprit: decades of drought, followed by catastrophic floods that would have turned the Weri's meticulous terraces into mudslides. But infrastructure this robust shouldn't have failed so completely. The answer may lie in the artifacts left behind. At the city of Huari, the empire's capital, excavations uncovered smashed storage jars and hastily buried treasures, signs of internal revolt. The Weri's greatest strength, their tightly controlled, road-dependent hierarchy, may have become their fatal flaw. When crops failed and provinces rebelled, the very highways that once united them became pipelines of chaos, allowing dissent to spread like wildfire. The cruelest irony, the Inca resurrected these roads centuries later, grafting their own empire onto the Weri's skeleton. Today, fragments of the original highways still surface: a staircase emerging from a farmer's field, a bridge uncovered by a landslide, each one a reminder that even the mightiest civilizations are just temporary tenants of the land they reshape. The Weri didn't vanish, they dissolved into the mountains they once mastered, their roads now whispering a warning. Connectivity can bind an empire together, but when the threads snap, the unraveling happens fast. While the Maya built pyramids and the Inca carved roads, Florida's Calusa people engineered an empire from oyster shells. Not just scattered refuse, these were deliberate monuments, towering 20 feet high in places, some spanning hundreds of acres. Imagine entire islands constructed from millions of mollusk shells, their bleached surfaces gleaming under the subtropical sun like shattered porcelain. The Calusa didn't just live off the water, they rewrote the land itself to serve their needs, creating a civilization so adapted to wetlands that Spanish conquistadors, for all their guns and steel, could never fully conquer them. Their secret, a network of canals slicing through mangrove thickets like aquatic highways, wide enough for 40-foot-long dugout canoes to glide through in formation. These weren't mere footpaths through swamps, They were the Calusa's interstate system, connecting shell-mound citadels like Mount Key, where the king's palace stood atop a 30-foot shell summit overlooking Estero Bay. Archaeologists mapping these waterways with sonar have uncovered something astonishing. The canals align with seasonal tidal flows, suggesting the Calusa didn't just dig ditches. They engineered hydrology, manipulating currents to control fishing grounds and speed military movements. And military they were. Unlike the peaceful stereotype of coastal foragers, the Calusa ruled through a mix of spiritual authority and naval might. Spanish journals describe their warriors ambushing ships with hurled spears from fleets of hundreds of canoes, their fighters' bodies tattooed with shark and ray motifs. When Ponce de Leon landed in 1513, hoping to claim La Florida for Spain, the Calusa repelled his forces so decisively that he fled with an arrow in his thigh, a wound that later killed him. How did a society without metal, without agriculture, resist European conquest for nearly 200 years? The answer lies in their politics of water. The Calusa didn't have farmland to burn or cities to besiege. Their wealth was mobility and maritime knowledge. Shell middens weren't just trash piles, they were elevated refuges during storms, platforms for temples, and even tools of diplomacy. At Quimaco, excavations revealed wooden masks with movable parts, possibly used in rituals where visiting chiefs were dazzled into submission. The Calusa understood their power came from controlling access to fishing grounds, to trade routes for precious shark's teeth and loggerhead turtle shells, and most crucially, to fresh water. In a land where rivers blended salt and fresh unpredictably, whoever controlled the springs controlled life itself. Yet their greatest defiance might be ecological. While Europeans saw swamps as wastelands to be drained, the Calusa thrived in them, building fish corrals from woven vines and crafting tools from conch so precisely that modern engineers marvel at their efficiency. Their shell mounds weren't static, they were living infrastructure. Layers of shells neutralized acidic soil, allowing gardens to flourish atop them, while the porous material filtered rainwater into clean reservoirs. Even in death, the Calusa merged with their environment. Burial mounds incorporated shells arranged in spirals, some bodies curled in fetal positions as if returning to the sea that sustained them. When the last Calusa refugees finally paddled to Cuba in the 1700s, fleeing slave raids and European diseases, they left behind canals silting over and shell islands reclaimed by palms. But dive into the murky waters of southwest Florida today, and your fingers might brush a centuries-old oyster bed, not nature's work, but the stubborn remnants of a kingdom that proved you don't need stone to build an empire. Just shells, ingenuity, and the unshakable belief that land wasn't meant to be conquered but negotiated. Standing alone on the windswept Altiplano of Bolivia, the Sun Gate of Tiwanaku isn't just a carved stone, it's a frozen moment of celestial obsession. This 10-ton archway, hewn from a single block of andesite, rises above the ruins of a city that thrived at 12,000 feet, where the air is so thin modern visitors gasp for breath. Every inch of its surface hums with intention. The central figure, often called the staff god, holds thunderbolts in each hand while rays burst from his head, surrounded by 48 smaller figures, 30 with human faces, the rest adorned with condor masks. At first glance, it's a masterpiece of iconography, but tilt your head just as the winter solstice sun rises and the gate transforms into something far more profound, a working calendar etched in stone. The precision is staggering. Carved lines along the gate's edges align with the sun's position on key agricultural dates, while the smaller figures may mark lunar cycles. Researchers have noticed something even more intriguing. The layout mirrors constellations visible from Tiwanaku 1,500 years ago, particularly the Southern Cross and Alpha Centauri. This wasn't just art, it was an almanac for planting, a ritual timetable, and possibly even a warning system. local Aymara elders still recount an ancient flood myth, a deluge so catastrophic it drowned the world, sparing only those who fled to the highest peaks. Curiously, geological studies of Lake Titicaca's shoreline reveal evidence of massive prehistoric floods, with sediment layers suggesting water levels once rose 60 feet above modern marks. Could the Sun Gate's alignment have tracked more than seasons? Was it a celestial clock counting down to disaster? Then there's the enigma of its construction. Unlike the Inca who quarried stone nearby, Tiwanaku's builders hauled this monolith from a volcano 50 miles away without wheels or draft animals. The gate's surface shows drill marks and cuts so precise they suggest metal tools, yet the Tiwanaku left no evidence of metallurgy beyond copper ornaments. Even more baffling, the backside is unfinished, as if work halted abruptly. Some researchers speculate the gate was meant to be part of a larger structure, perhaps a pyramid or temple that was never completed. Others point to cracks radiating from the base, evidence that the ground beneath it shifted violently, possibly during an earthquake that coincided with those apocalyptic floods. The deepest mystery lies in the staff god's tears. Zoom in on the central figure's cheeks, and you'll find carved droplets streaming downward, a detail replicated on pottery fragments found throughout the site. In Andean cosmology, weeping deities often signal impending upheaval. Combined with the flood myths and geological data, it's tempting to read the Sun Gate as both a monument and a memorial, a civilization's attempt to encode their trauma into stone, ensuring future generations would remember the waters that nearly erased them. Today, the gate stands slightly askew, its base sinking into the soft earth, but each June 21st, when the solstice light pierces its archway and illuminates the staff god's face, Aymara shamans still gather. They burn offerings of coca leaves and whisper prayers to Pachamama, the Earth Mother. In their rituals, the stone isn't just a relic, it's a living bridge between past and present, where the ancestors' warnings still echo across the centuries. The Sun Gate doesn't merely mark time, it demands we listen. In the dense pine forests of East Texas, where the Caddo people once thrived, an unusual pattern rises from the earth, not the familiar pyramids of Mesoamerica, but spiral mounds coiled like sleeping serpents. These earthen sculptures, some reaching 30 feet high, twist in precise counterclockwise formations, their curves mirroring the path of the sun during solstices. At the center of the largest mound in present-day Caddo Mound State Historic Site, archaeologists found a fire altar scorched by centuries of rituals, its ashes mixed with fragments of conch shells imported from the Gulf Coast over 200 miles away. For the Caddo, these shells weren't just ornaments, they were sacred conduits, their inner spirals echoing the very mounds that cradled them. The precision of these earthworks reveals a society deeply attuned to celestial rhythms. During the summer solstice, sunlight slices through a gap in the surrounding forest, striking the mound's central altar at dawn. Winter solstice observations are even more striking. Shadows from adjacent posts align with the spiral's outer rim, creating a moving spectacle that marks the year's shortest day. Unlike the grand stone observatories of the Maya, the Caddo's calendar was sculpted directly into the land, a living almanac that blended astronomy with agriculture. Soil samples show the mounds were layered with specific clays to enhance stability, while buried offerings of seeds and tools suggest ceremonies timed to planting cycles. But the true marvel lies in what these mounds connected. Excavations uncovered shells from the Gulf, copper from the Great Lakes, and even flakes of obsidian traced to Mexico's volcanoes, proof of a trade network spanning thousands of miles. The Caddo didn't just move goods, they moved ideas. At the Spiro Mounds in Oklahoma, a sister site to the Texas complexes, artisans fashioned conch shells into ritual cups adorned with winged serpents, a motif borrowed from distant Mesoamerican cultures. Yet the Caddo made these symbols their own, blending them with local designs of corn and thunderbirds. The most haunting discovery came from a mound's core, a burial vault containing a high-status woman wrapped in a shroud studded with over 10,000 shell beads, her body surrounded by pots filled with yopon holly, the caffeine-rich plant used in ceremonial black drink purifications. Isotope analysis revealed she'd spent her childhood near the coast, likely sent inland as part of a political marriage to cement trade alliances. Her tomb was sealed with a layer of red ochre, its pigment mine from Arkansas, a final, crimson tribute to the far-flung connections that sustained her people. By the time European explorers reached Caddo lands in the 1600s, the mounds were already ancient, but the Caddo's descendants, the Hassanai, still recounted stories of the Great Mound where the Thunderbird danced, a place where ancestors communed with forces that balanced sky and soil. Today, as archaeologists map previously overlooked spiral patterns in the region using LiDAR, one truth becomes clear: these weren't just monuments, they were a language written in earth and shell, a testament to a culture that saw trade routes as sacred pathways and the turning of the stars as something to be walked step by step in the soft clay of home. On the arid coast of southern Peru, where the wind howls across necropolises buried for millennia, the Paracas people left behind a legacy that defies easy explanation. Hundreds of skulls, some stretched to nearly twice their natural length, their elongated forms cradled in vibrant textiles woven with gods and beasts. These weren't accidents of nature. From infancy, Paracas nobles had their heads bound between boards or wrapped tightly with cloth, molding soft bone into towering, otherworldly silhouettes. To modern eyes, they look almost alien, sparking wild theories about extraterrestrial lineage. But the truth, woven into the very fibers of their burial shrouds, is far more complex, a story of identity, power, and a civilization's desperate grasp on the divine. What sets the Paracas skulls apart isn't just their shape, but their sheer diversity. Some curve gently backward like a crescent moon, others jut forward like the prow of a ship. Each deformation style corresponded to specific lineages, a living crest announcing bloodlines as clearly as a royal coat of arms. Excavations at the Huaycayan necropolis revealed entire families buried together, their skulls sharing identical contours, proof this was no random fashion but a hereditary tradition. And the artifacts accompanying them leave no doubt about their status. Headdresses dripping with golden pendants, mantles embroidered with psychedelic visions of flying shamans, even traces of hallucinogenic snuff tucked into nasal cavities for the journey beyond. Then there's the science. In 1928, Peruvian archaeologist Julio Tello unearthed a cache of these skulls, noting their unusually large cranial volume, up to 25% bigger than average. Recent DNA testing added fuel to the fringe theories. Some skulls displayed genetic markers rare among indigenous Americans, including a mutated gene linked to elongated bone growth. But before UFO enthusiasts could declare victory, anthropologists pointed to a simpler explanation. The Paracas were masterful seafarers, their traders sailing as far north as Ecuador and as far south as Chile, absorbing outsiders into their elite through marriage. Those anomalous genes likely arrived via coastal traders, not celestial visitors. The real shock came when researchers examined the skull's interiors. CT scans revealed that the deformation wasn't purely cosmetic, it reshaped brains as well. The parietal lobes responsible for sensory input were compressed upward, while the occipital lobes flattened toward the base. Could this have altered perception? Paracas textiles offer tantalizing hints. Their fabrics swirl with imagery of trance states, figures floating between serpents and stars, their eyes rolled back in ecstasy. Perhaps cranial shaping wasn't just about status. It may have been a tool to induce altered consciousness, a permanent doorway to the spirit world etched into bone. Yet the greatest mystery isn't how they did it, but why they stopped. By 300 CE, the practice vanished as suddenly as it appeared. The Paracas, absorbed into the Nazca culture, abandoned skull elongation just as their famous desert geoglyphs began appearing. Some scholars speculate the Nazca's celestial obsessions made physical deformation redundant. Why reshape the head when you could etch prayers into the earth itself? Others point to climate collapse. Dwindling resources may have forced societies to prioritize survival over symbolism. Today, the skulls remain a Rorschach test for the modern world. To scientists, they're evidence of cultural ingenuity. To conspiracy theorists, they're proof of ancient astronauts. But in the quiet of Lima's museums, where these fragile relics rest on beds of sand, the truth feels more intimate. Each skull is a parent's hand pressing gently against an infant's forehead, shaping not just bone but destiny, a family's silent prayer to reach beyond the human toward something timeless. Deep in the sandstone heart of New Mexico's desert, a labyrinth of towering walls and cryptic doorways rises from the dust. Chaco Canyon's great houses, their precise geometries etched against the sky like a celestial blueprint. These sprawling structures, some stretching over 500 feet long with hundreds of rooms, weren't mere dwellings. Their walls align with solstice sunrises, their staircases vanish into subterranean chambers, and their windows frame the moon's most dramatic standstills. The question isn't just what the ancestral Puebloans built here, but why were these monumental complexes sacred pilgrimage sites drawing thousands, or precision instruments for tracking cosmic cycles modern astronomers are only now deciphering? Climb to the top of Pueblo Bonito, the canyon's largest great house, and the astronomical argument becomes undeniable. The building's rear wall runs perfectly north-south, while its front wall angles precisely to capture the lunar minor standstill, an event occurring every 18.6 years when the moon pauses at its southernmost point in the sky. On this night, moonlight floods through a narrow window in the western wall, casting a blade of silver light across a spiral petroglyph carved into the opposite cliff face. The effect is no accident. Recent laser scans reveal the window was painstakingly widened and narrowed over generations, as if the builders were fine-tuning their celestial eyepiece. Yet the same site holds evidence of mass gatherings, trash mounds filled with shattered pottery and the bones of turkeys and deer, far more than Chaco's thin desert soils could have supported. Was this a holy city where pilgrims feasted under ritual moons, or a Stone Age observatory where priest astronomers charted the heavens? The answer might lie in the road's 12-foot-wide thoroughways radiating from Chaco like spokes, some stretching over 60 miles into distant mountains. These aren't the meandering paths of traders, they're arrows straight, engineered to follow celestial bearings. One road runs dead straight toward the sacred mountain of Huafono Mesa, aligning with the summer solstice sunrise. Another points to the southernmost moonrise position, but here's the twist: these roads often lead to nothing tangible, no villages, no resources. Instead, they terminate at isolated shrines or natural landmarks visible from Chaco's towers. Were these spiritual pathways guiding pilgrims through a sacred geography? Or were they sightlines for astronomical observations, allowing watchers to synchronize rituals across vast distances? Then there's the matter of the kivas, round, subterranean chambers dotting the great houses, their walls lined with niches that catch solstice sunlight. At Chetroketal, a kiva's alignment creates a stunning effect. On winter solstice dawn, sunlight slips through a niche and strikes a painted spiral on the opposite wall, splitting it into two perfect halves. Similar light plays occur at other great houses, each calibrated to different celestial events. But these kivas also show signs of intense communal activity, layers of soot from countless fires, floors worn smooth by generations of dancing feet. The ancestral Puebloans didn't separate science and spirituality. They wove them together, turning stone and mortar into a resonant bridge between earth and sky. The most compelling clue, though, might be the timbers, hundreds of pine and fir beams, some hauled from mountains 50 miles away, frame Chaco's roofs. Dendrochronology reveals something astonishing. Many were cut during lunar standstill years, suggesting the canyon's construction boom pulsed to the rhythm of the moon. Yet at the same time, pottery styles from as far away as Colorado and Arizona appear in Choco's trash middens, proof that distant communities journeyed here. Perhaps the truth isn't an either-or, but a both-and. Choco wasn't just an observatory or a pilgrimage site. It was a place where the cosmos touched the earth, where the moon cycles dictated both ceremony and architecture, and where travelers came not just to witness celestial wonders but to become part of them. Today, standing in Fajada Butt's shadow where 3 stone slabs slice sunlight into daggers of precision on summer solstice, you can almost hear the echoes of chanters counting moonrises, of architects arguing over alignments, of children marveling as a beam of light inches across a carved spiral. The ancestral Pueblones left no written records, but their stone hymn to the heavens still resonates, a reminder that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only honored. When the Inca Empire stretched its golden tendrils southward, hungry for new conquests, they met a wall of resistance unlike any other. The Mapuche, a people who called themselves the Earth's rightful owners. Unlike the mighty Inca or the Aztec, the Mapuche built no sprawling cities, no towering pyramids. Their power lay in the land itself, in the tangled forests of southern Chile, where every tree and river became a weapon against invaders. By the time the Spanish arrived in the 1500s, steel armor and muskets in hand, they'd soon learn what the Inca had already discovered. The Mapuche couldn't be bought, broken, or bullied into submission. The Inca's failure to conquer the Mapuche was no small embarrassment. At its peak, the Inca Empire subdued nations across the Andes with a mix of military might and strategic alliances. Yet when their armies pushed into Mapuche territory around 1470, they were met with guerrilla tactics so effective that the Inca eventually built a fortified border, the Pucará de China, just to contain them. Mapuche warriors, expert in ambush, used the dense rainforests to their advantage, striking suddenly before vanishing into the mist, their weapon of choice. The macana, a wooden club studded with razor-sharp volcanic glass, capable of crushing Spanish helmets centuries later, but their true strength was unity. Unlike other Andean societies fractured by internal rivalries, the Mapuche formed a decentralized but cohesive network of clans called love, bound by loyalty rather than centralized rule. When one love was threatened, others rallied without hesitation, turning what should have been easy conquests into quagmires. Then came the Spanish. In 1550, Conquistador Pedro de Valdivia established settlements in Mapuche lands, confident of quick victory. His arrogance cost him dearly. Within 3 years, Mapuche forces led by the legendary strategist Lautaro annihilated Valdivia's army at the Battle of Tucapel. According to chroniclers, the captured Valdivia was subjected to a ritual execution, forced to drink molten gold as retribution for his greed. For the next 300 years, Spain poured troops and treasure into the region, only to face relentless rebellion. The Mapuche mastered stolen cavalry tactics, turning the Spaniards' own horses against them, and even adapted European steel into their traditional weapons. What truly set the Mapuche apart was their diplomacy. Realizing prolonged war was unsustainable, they negotiated a series of parleys with the Spanish crown, culminating in the 1800s with formal recognition of their autonomy, an unprecedented concession in colonial Americas. Their territory became a de facto independent nation, marked by border rivers where Spanish laws simply didn't apply. Even after Chile's independence in 1818, the Mapuche held their ground, forcing the new republic to sign treaties acknowledging their sovereignty. The echoes of this defiance linger today. Modern DNA studies reveal less European ancestry among the Mapuche than any neighboring indigenous group, a testament to their resistance against assimilation. Their language, Mapudungun, thrives alongside Spanish, and their ancestral lands remain hotly contested. In 2020, wildfires ravaged southern Chile, but when the government sent aid, many Mapuche communities refused, not out of pride but principle. Centuries of broken promises had taught them to trust no one but themselves. The Mapuche never built stone monuments to their victories. Their legacy is written in the untamed landscape they fought to protect, and in the unbroken spirit of a people who proved empires aren't invincible, just temporary. On the windswept cliffs of Tenerife, where volcanic peaks scrape the sky, the Guanche people practiced a funerary rite so precise it would make an Egyptian embalmer nod in respect. Long before Spanish conquistadors set foot on the Canary Islands in the 1400s, this indigenous culture was preserving their dead with techniques eerily similar to those used along the Nile, despite having no known contact with ancient Egypt or its famed mummification traditions. The process began with dignity. When a Guanche noble died, their body was washed with salt water from the Atlantic, then carefully eviscerated. Organs were removed through incisions in the abdomen, the cavities stuffed with aromatic herbs like thyme and pine resin to slow decay. But here's where the method diverged. Instead of natron salts, the Guanches used the island's unique volcanic pumice to desiccate the flesh, wrapping the body in goatskin shrouds treated with a mixture of animal fat and crushed seashells. A waterproofing technique modern scientists have found remarkably effective. Some mummies were then placed in caves so dry and aerated that natural mummification completed the work, leaving skin and hair intact centuries later. At the Museo de la Naturaleza y el Hombre in Santa Cruz, one Guanche mummy still wears his burial adornments, a crown of braided reeds and a belt strung with polished cowrie shells, each one symbolizing a link between the deceased and the ocean that sustained his people. Their hands are clasped over the chest in a pose reminiscent of pharaonic sarcophagi, though Guanche spiritual beliefs centered not on a sun god but on a chamon, the sky deity who governed rain and fertility. What's truly baffling is the scale of this practice. Over 1,000 mummies have been found across the 7 main islands, many arranged in family groups within labyrinthine lava tubes. At Barranco de Hurques, a hidden ravine on Tenerife, explorers in the 1700s stumbled upon a necropolis holding hundreds of mummies seated upright, their faces turned toward Mount Teide, the Guanche's sacred axis between earth and heaven. But the most haunting discovery came in 1933 when a farmer's plow struck something strange beneath the soil. The mummy of a young boy, barely 10 years old, emerged with his funeral goods, a wooden toy, a bowl of gofio, a roasted grain paste still eaten in the Canaries today, and a tiny leather pouch containing milk teeth. Isotope analysis revealed he'd been fed a special diet in his final months, rich in goat milk and shellfish, perhaps preparation for a journey his people believed required strength. Why go to such lengths? Spanish chroniclers recorded Guanche elders speaking of the land of the ancestors, a mist-shrouded afterlife where mummification anchored the soul to recognizable form. Yet, unlike the Egyptians with their elaborate tomb goods, the Guanches buried their dead with practical items, fishing hooks for the men, spindle whorls for the women, all suggesting a pragmatic view of eternity where daily skills still mattered. The final irony: when the Spanish began exhuming Guanche mummies in the 1500s, they ground them into powder, believing the preserved flesh held medicinal properties. Centuries later, modern geneticists salvaging DNA from surviving mummies made an electrifying discovery. The Guanches weren't just skilled embalmers, they were likely the last survivors of a prehistoric Berber migration from North Africa, their mummification techniques possibly echoing lost Saharan traditions older than the pyramids. Their legacy now whispers through the bones they so carefully tended, a silent protest against oblivion written in skin and salt. Buried beneath the rolling hills of eastern Oklahoma, where the Arkansas River winds through what's now called the Spiro Mounds, archaeologists uncovered a paradox wrapped in copper and carved from seashell, a treasure trove of artifacts whispering of connections spanning half a continent. Among the most startling finds were breastplates and ceremonial axes crafted from Great Lakes copper, their surfaces etched with intricate designs echoing styles from the Gulf Coast to the Appalachian foothills. These weren't just trade goods, they were masterpieces of a civilization that thrived at the crossroads of ancient America, weaving distant cultures into a tapestry all its own. The mystery begins with the copper itself. Metallurgists traced its origin to Michigan's Keweenaw Peninsula, over 1,000 miles north of Spiro. But how did it get there? The answer lies in the meticulous craftsmanship. Many artifacts show signs of being reworked. Old pieces melted down and reshaped, their chemical fingerprints revealing multiple generations of use. Some copper plates bear puncture marks where they were once stitched to leather or fabric, likely worn by elite travelers as badges of status on their journeys between ceremonial centers. Others were deliberately broken before burial, their fragments scattered like ritual breadcrumbs across the site's massive mortuary crypts. Then there are the shells. Hundreds of whelks and conchs from the Gulf of Mexico were carved into ornate cups and gorgets, their surfaces transformed into scenes of otherworldly beings. One famous example, the Craig Mound spider, depicts a hybrid creature with human eyes and arachnid legs, its body woven into a geometric cosmos of cross-hatched lines. But the real shock came when researchers noticed something peculiar. The shell engravings were done with copper tools. Tiny striations in the grooves match the unique hardness of Great Lakes copper, proving the artists had direct access to both materials, not just second-hand trade. What emerges is a picture of Spiro not as a passive recipient of distant goods, but as a creative powerhouse where raw materials were transformed into sacred objects. Chemical analysis of pigments reveals even deeper connections. The vibrant red cinnabar used to adorn shell carvings came from New Mexico's deserts, while flecks of mica embedded in ceremonial clay likely originated from the Carolinas. This was no haphazard exchange network. It was a carefully curated system of spiritual commerce where materials carried not just economic value but cosmological significance. The most tantalizing clues lie in the burials themselves. High-status individuals were interred with copper-covered staffs and headdresses resembling those of Mississippian elites far to the east, yet the arrangement of graves mirrors customs seen in ancestral Pueblo sites to the west. One particularly lavish tomb contained a warrior buried with a copper axe in one hand and a conch-shell trumpet in the other, his skeleton surrounded by the remains of 48 other individuals, likely retainers or sacrificial companions. Isotope testing on their teeth told a story written in childhood drinking water. Some came from the Ozarks, others from the Tennessee Valley, proving Spiro was a melting pot of the ancient world. Yet for all its grandeur, Spiro's golden age was brief. By 1450 CE, the mounds were sealed, their contents deliberately buried under layers of earth as if hiding them from time itself. Some researchers believe a climate shift disrupted trade routes. Others point to signs of conflict, charred timbers, and hastily filled storage pits, but the legacy endures in the artifacts left behind. A single engraved shell might depict a winged serpent next to a pattern identical to motifs from Cahokia, while a copper pendant's design mirrors those found in Florida's Calusa territories. Spiro didn't just collect treasures, it remixed them into something new, a cultural alchemy that turned copper and shell into a language of belonging. And today, as wind rustles through the grass where those mounds once stood, the land still hums with the memory of a place that dared to connect worlds. Long before the Inuit dominated the Arctic, another people thrived in that frozen expanse, masters of survival in a world where winter never truly lifted. The Dorset culture, named after Cape Dorset where their artifacts were first identified, carved out an existence so finely attuned to the ice that archaeologists once believed they were mythical. Their legacy lingers in delicate ivory figurines, miniature faces with slitted eyes and haunting smiles, some no larger than a thumbnail, others carved into the handles of hunting tools as if to infuse each strike with spirit. These weren't mere decorations, they were silent witnesses to a way of life that vanished suddenly, leaving behind one of the Arctic's most enduring mysteries. What sets the Dorset apart is their almost supernatural adaptability. Between 500 BC and 1500 CE, they clung to the harshest edges of the Arctic, from Greenland's frozen coasts to the treeless tundra of northern Canada, without bows, without dog sleds, and most puzzling of all, without the kayaks that later Inuit relied on. Instead, they hunted seals by patiently waiting at breathing holes, standing motionless for hours in bone-chilling winds, their clothing stitched so tightly from caribou hide that modern researchers have failed to replicate its insulation. Their winter dwellings were engineering marvels, semi-subterranean homes dug into permafrost, their walls reinforced with whale ribs, their entrances tunneled to trap heat. At the site of Kajau in Greenland, a Dorset house was found with its original whalebone rafters intact, the floor still scattered with stone tools and narwhal teeth, as if the inhabitants had just stepped outside moments before. Then there are the carvings. Among the most enigmatic is the so-called sadness mask, a palm-sized ivory face with hollow eyes and a downturned mouth discovered on Baffin Island. Unlike Inuit art, which often depicts animals or hunting scenes, Dorset carvings fixate on human-like figures, some with elongated heads, others with limbs fused to their bodies in impossible contortions. Archaeologist Patricia Sutherland noticed something even stranger. Many figurines were intentionally broken, their fragments scattered across sites. Were these offerings to spirits? Representations of shape-shifting shamans mid-transformation. The Dorset left no written clues, but their art suggests a cosmology where the boundaries between human, animal, and supernatural were fluid. Their disappearance is the real conundrum. Around the year 1300, as the Thule people, ancestors of the modern Inuit, migrated eastward from Alaska, the Dorset vanished. Not with a bang, but a whisper. There's no evidence of violent conflict, no mass graves, no burned villages. Instead, the archaeological record shows a quiet fading, tools left unfinished, hearths gone cold. Climate data reveals a possible culprit, the medieval warm period, which destabilized the ice edges where Dorset hunters thrived. Seal populations shifted, and the Thule, with their superior technology like harpoons and dog teams, adapted faster. Yet the most tantalizing clue comes from Inuit oral histories. Legends speak of the Tuniat, a gentle but formidable people who were stronger than stone, but retreated when the newcomers arrived. Some stories describe them as giants, others claim they could summon fog to vanish from sight. In a handful of remote Greenlandic sites, Dorset and Thule artifacts appear side by side, hinting at brief coexistence. Did the last Dorset teach their successors how to read the ice? Did they intermarry, their bloodlines dissolving into Thule clans like snowflakes in the sea? The final chapter might lie beneath the ice itself. In 2018, melting permafrost near Nunavut's Hudson Bay exposed a previously unknown Dorset site, a circular stone structure filled with ivory carvings of polar bears and human-bear hybrids. One figure, half-finished, still gripped the flint knife that had been shaping it 1,000 winters ago. The Dorset may be gone, but their art endures, each tiny face a plea to be remembered. Not as failures eclipsed by the Inuit, but as pioneers who turned the world's cruelest landscape into a home and left behind beauty in the teeth of the wind. From the abandoned citadels of the Maya to the mercury-laden tunnels beneath Teotihuacan, these 25 mysteries remind us that the ancient Americas were never a quiet backwater. They were a stage for staggering innovation, spiritual depth, and sudden disappearances that still leave archaeologists scratching their heads. Think about it, civilizations that charted Venus with jaw-dropping precision, yet left no explanation for why they walked away from their glittering cities. Cultures that engineered roads and pyramids rivaling Rome's, only to vanish so completely that even their names were forgotten. Every answer we've uncovered only peels back another layer of questions. Were the Nazca Lines a celestial map, a prayer for water, or something we haven't even imagined? Did the Tarim mummies carry secrets of a lost Bronze Age migration, or were they part of a network we're only beginning to trace? And here's the thrilling part. You might help crack these cases. LiDAR scans are revealing lost cities under jungle canopies. Advances in DNA analysis are rewriting human migration timelines. Even amateur explorers stumbling upon artifacts in their backyards could reshape the narrative. So tell me in the comments, which mystery hooked you the most? Do you think the Maya collapse was climate, war, or something more cosmic? Could those elongated paracas skulls hint at forgotten rituals, or are we missing a bigger story? Your theories fuel this search as much as any trowel or satellite image. This is just the beginning. Beyond the Americas, the world is packed with enigmas waiting for their turn in the spotlight, from the submerged ruins of Dwarka to the baffling anti-gravity effects of Egypt's Serapeum. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because we're diving deep into all of them. Up next, a journey to the desert sands of Arabia, where a civilization built stone monuments so vast they're only visible from space. Until then, keep questioning, keep wondering, and remember, history isn't a closed book. It's a puzzle with half the pieces still hidden, and every one of us holds a clue.